I'm Cassidy. I'm 32, and I work as a nurse, which is the whole reason my grandfather still has money in his name at all. Last spring, I passed out on stage at my nursing school graduation. Perforated ulcer, emergency surgery, blood transfusions. The hospital tried my family 9 separate times. Not one of them answered. They were 35,000 feet over the ocean, sipping champagne in first class on a flight to Rome that my grandfather paid for without knowing it. 3 days later, I opened my eyes to 58 missed calls and a single text from my mother. "We need you. Answer now." She wasn't asking whether I'd survived. She was asking me to unfreeze the bank account she'd been quietly bleeding dry for 3 years. Here's the part they didn't know. I'd already read the letter my grandfather pushed across my hospital tray. And what came next, none of them saw coming. If you've ever been the person everyone leans on but nobody ever checks on, stick with me. Let me take you back to the spring I graduated, and to that envelope on the hospital tray. The morning of my pinning ceremony, I was running on 3 hours of sleep and 2 gas station coffees, plus the kind of raw stubbornness you only get from paying your own way through an accelerated nursing program at 32. I'd just finished a 12-hour overnight shift, clocked out at 7, and driven straight to my grandfather's house in Gilbert to lay out his morning pills and leave scrambled eggs warming in the microwave. Harold Keller, 83, retired union electrician, mind like a razor, legs like wet paper. He was the only member of my family who even remembered that today was my day. I was wrapping the blood pressure cuff around his arm when my phone lit up. "Mom." Not a good luck text. Not a "we're proud of you." Instead, "Can you grab Trevor's dry cleaning on your way back? He forgot and the place closes at noon." Trevor's my older brother, 36, works in commercial real estate, drives a leased BMW, and apparently cannot retrieve his own shirts. I wrote back, "I can grab the dry cleaning. I can't be late to my own ceremony." 3 dots blinked, then vanished. Nothing else came. I kissed the top of Grandpa's head, locked up behind me, drove clear across to the cleaner in Scottsdale, hung my brother's button-downs on the hook behind my seat, and rolled into my apartment lot with exactly 35 minutes to shower, dress, and become the first person in my family to earn a nursing degree. Nobody called to see if I needed a lift. Nobody asked what time it started. My mother had the address. I'd sent it to her 3 times. The last time, she'd replied with a thumbs up and not one word more. That should have warned me. But I was still the type who believed a thumbs up meant, "I'll be there." 2 weeks before graduation, I'd accidentally turned the notifications back on for the family group chat. Technically, I was a member, the same way a fire extinguisher is technically part of a building. There for emergencies. Ignored the rest of the time. That night, the thread had gone off. Brooke, my brother's wife and the self-declared family event planner, had dropped a link to some fancy boutique hotel. "OMG, look at this rooftop. Rome, we deserve this." My mother, "Book it, I'll cover the flights." Trevor, "First class or I'm not going, life's short." 52 messages. Restaurant recommendations, packing lists, spa bookings, a full week-long itinerary for June 2nd through the 9th. My ceremony was June 4th. Not one message mentioned it. Not one message mentioned me. I kept scrolling. Brooke had even posted a poll. "Best photo spot at the Coliseum? Vote below." Mom voted. Trevor voted. I read the whole thing twice, hunting for my name, for an invite, for even a "Cassidy, you in?" There was nothing. 20 minutes later, my mother texted me privately. "Honey, we'll be out of town during your ceremony. Can you stay with Grandpa while we're gone? He shouldn't be by himself." There it was. No apology, no explanation, just a chore. Watch Grandpa. "You're good at that." I muted the chat again and went back to my pharmacology notes. My hands stayed steady. My chest didn't. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I'd been doing everything alone for years anyway, working as a nursing assistant through my 20s, clawing through a divorce, saving up for school 1 shift at a time. I didn't need them in the crowd. I just wanted them there. Grandpa Harold was the whole reason I went into nursing. When I was 24 and my marriage was coming apart, I slept in his spare room for 5 weeks. He never once asked what happened. He just made coffee every morning, left the paper folded to the crossword, and said, "You'll sort it out, kid. You always do." He was the one person in my family who said that and meant it as praise instead of a way to shrug me off. For the last couple of years, every Sunday I drove out to his little ranch house on the east side of Gilbert and spent the afternoon there. I checked his vitals, sorted his pill organizer, made sure the fridge wasn't packed with expired lunch meat. He'd tell me about wiring schools back in the 70s, about my late grandmother Ruth, about the day he retired and the union handed him a brass pocket watch with his name cut into the back. 40 years, he'd say, flipping it over in his palm, and they gave me a clock, like I needed something to remind me how old I was. Dry as a bone, that man. I got my sense of humor straight from him. That Sunday, 2 weeks out from graduation, he looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "Your eyes look dark, Cassidy, you eating?" "I eat." "Liar." He said it exactly the way my clinical mentor said it. "Grandpa, I'm fine." He went quiet a beat. "Then, your mother won't let me see my own bank statements anymore. Says she's taking care of it all." I looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean she gets to the mail before I can, told the credit union I need help handling my accounts." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't like it, kid, something's off." I should have pushed. I didn't. I was too worn down, too buried in finals, too locked into being the reliable one who never made waves. Here's what I didn't tell a soul that spring. I was breaking down. 18 months of an accelerated program, clinicals 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts on the weekends, studying past 2 in the morning on the nights in between. I lived on ibuprofen, black coffee, and the stubborn belief that rest was something I hadn't earned yet. The pain under my breastbone had started back in January. A dull burn, worse after coffee, worse after skipping meals, and I skipped most meals. I threw back ibuprofen like it was candy for the ache in my back from standing all shift. 400 milligrams, 600, sometimes 8. When the soreness crept up into my shoulders, I knew, clinically, what long-term use of those pills does to a stomach lining. I knew what stress does to acid. I knew every warning sign. I also knew I had 6 weeks left and no room in my schedule to be the patient. Denise Alvarez, my charge nurse and clinical mentor, caught me flinching during a dressing change one afternoon. "Ross, you're gray." "It's the overhead lights, they make everyone look gray." "It's not the lights." She folded her arms. "When did you last eat something that didn't come out of a vending machine?" "Define recently." She didn't laugh. "I mean it, you're running on empty. 6 weeks left." "I can do 6 more weeks." What I didn't tell Denise, I'd noticed my stool going dark, almost black. Every nursing student on the planet knows what that means. Bleeding somewhere up top, slow, probably manageable, probably. But I told myself it was the iron pills. It was easier to swallow a comfortable lie than to sit in a waiting room I couldn't afford and hear something I couldn't fit into my calendar. 10 days before graduation, I stopped by my mother's place to ask about Grandpa's medications. His cardiologist's office had called my cell because the pharmacy couldn't run his refill. Something about the auto-pay account getting declined. Mom was at the kitchen counter, laptop open, comparing luggage sets for Rome. Marlene Ross, 61, widowed for 9 years, ran a tight house and an even tighter guest list. "Mom, Grandpa's heart medication didn't go through. The pharmacy said his account bounced." She didn't look up. "I'll take care of it." "You said that last month." "He's almost out of his beta blockers." "Cassidy." Now she looked up, wearing the face she used whenever I was being difficult, which meant any time I asked a question she didn't want to answer. "Your grandfather's finances are complicated. I have power of attorney, I'm managing it. You don't need to worry about his prescriptions." "He needs those prescriptions." And I said I'll handle it. She turned back to the screen. "Look at this hard-shell one in dusty rows." Honestly, half the time he doesn't even know what day it is. I'm the one keeping track of everything. I stood there holding the pharmacy printout. She was flat wrong. Grandpa knew exactly what day it was. He knew my shift schedule. He knew my exam dates. He knew my ceremony landed on a Tuesday. He could name every nurse on his cardiologist's team. but my mother had decided he was slipping, and once Marlene decided something, it became the whole family's version of the truth. I left the printout on the counter and drove home. On the way, I called the pharmacy myself and paid the $260 refill with my own debit card. It was rent money. I'd figure out the rest later. I always figured it out later. The next weekend, I drove Grandpa to pick up the refill in person. He insisted on coming inside. At the counter, the pharmacist, a woman named Melissa who'd been filling his scripts for years, leaned over and said quietly, "Mr. Keller, I want you to know your auto pay has bounced 4 times over the last 5 months. We keep calling the number on file, but the woman who picks up says she's handling it." "What woman?" Grandpa asked. "She says she's your daughter, that she has power of attorney." His face changed. Not confusion. The opposite, sharp, cold clarity. "I gave her that paper 2 years ago after my pneumonia. She swore it was only for emergencies." I put a hand on his arm to steady him. Melissa glanced between us. "I just wanted you to know the balance is current now. Somebody paid it yesterday." That somebody was me. That was my rent money sitting in a pharmacy register in Gilbert because my mother couldn't be bothered to keep her own father's heart medication active while she shopped for suitcases. On the drive home, he was silent. "Then she's spending my money, isn't she?" It wasn't a question. "I don't know yet," I said, "but something's wrong. I'm not senile, Cassidy, I know my own accounts. I had more than $55,000 in that credit union last year. She told me she'd invested it, but I never put my name on any investment." $55,000. A lifetime of union paychecks, saved carefully, spent carefully. And now his pharmacy card was bouncing. I gripped the wheel and kept my mouth shut, because if I opened it, I'd say something I couldn't walk back. So I drove, and I thought about how much first-class seats to Rome must cost. 3 days before graduation, Denise pulled me aside after our final clinical debrief. Not about my health this time, about coursework. We'd been going over case studies on abuse of vulnerable adults, and she wanted us solid on our reporting duties before we got our licenses. "Arizona's clear on this," she said, leaning against the nurse's station. "If you're a healthcare professional and you have reasonable cause to believe a vulnerable adult is being exploited, financially, physically, doesn't matter which, you're a mandated reporter. You file with Adult Protective Services. No exceptions." I nodded. I'd read the statute enough times to recite it in my sleep. "And here's what people miss," she went on. "Financial exploitation is the most common kind. It's also the kind families are best at hiding because it never leaves a bruise." She looked right at me. "You okay, Ross? You've been somewhere else all week." "Just tired." "Tired is normal. Gray and 18 pounds lighter than you were in the fall is not normal. I'll rest after graduation." She sighed, the sigh of a woman who'd been a nurse for decades and could smell a lie about being fine. "One more thing," she said as I turned to go. "If your gut tells you something's wrong, with a patient, with a family member, with anyone, write it down. Dates, amounts, names, that's not paranoia, that's the job." I drove home thinking about pharmacy receipts and bounced auto pays and $55,000 that might not be invested anywhere at all. I thought about Grandpa's face at that counter. I thought about my mother comparing luggage while his medication account sat empty. Write it down. Dates, amounts, names. My nursing career hadn't officially started, and it was already following me through the front door. 2 nights before the trip, Mom threw a bon voyage dinner. Her words. Brooke brought wine. Trevor brought his appetite. I brought a casserole and the faint hope somebody might mention my ceremony. We sat around the same dining table where I'd done my homework as a kid, where my dad used to carve the Thanksgiving turkey before cancer took him when I was 24. Mom lifted her glass. Finally getting away, to Rome, to family. She scanned the table with the look of a woman certain she deserved beautiful things. "We just need a break with no stress and no drama." There it was, no stress, no drama. I watched who she looked at when she said it. She looked at me. Brooke clinked her glass. "Honestly, Marlene, you've earned it. You do so much for everyone." Trevor nodded like she'd stated a scientific fact. I ate my casserole and said nothing. After the second bottle, I gave it one try. "So the ceremony's Tuesday at 10. Valley View Community College, Building D. I can text you the address again if. Honey, Mom set down her fork. We already talked about this. The flight leaves Monday night. There's nothing to be done about the timing. You could take a later flight. Cassidy, be reasonable, Trevor chimed in. It's just a pinning, it's not like it's med school. Brooke laughed. I didn't. It's my degree, I said quietly. I worked 4 years for it. And we're proud of you. Mom gave me the smile that ends a conversation. You don't need us there, you've always been so independent. Independent. The family word for not worth changing plans over. I cleared the plates, loaded the dishwasher, and drove home with a stomach full of acid and casserole and the quiet knowledge that I was on my own. Grandpa came by that same night. No call ahead. He just showed up at my door with a paper bag of tamales from the place on Main Street and a look like he had something serious to say. We sat at my kitchen table. He ate slowly, watching me. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 things. The first was the brass pocket watch, scratched, heavy, warm from being against his body. The back read H. Keller, 40 years, local 388. I want you to have this, he said. Why now? Because you're graduating. And because I want something ticking beside you on those night shifts in those waiting rooms for the times I can't be there. I turned it over. The second hand jumped in tiny, precise ticks. 40 years of a man's life measured out in brass and glass. Grandpa, I can't take this. You can, you will. He slid the second thing across the table. A sealed white business envelope with a credit union logo in the corner. His monthly statement. I need you to look at this for me. Your mother grabs my mail now, but this one came to a P.O. box she doesn't know about. I opened one last month and the numbers didn't look right. But my eyes, I can't trust what I'm reading anymore. When do you want me to open it? After your ceremony. When you've got time, he rubbed his jaw. I just need somebody I trust to tell me the truth. I set the watch on my nightstand and slid the envelope into the inside pocket of the blazer I'd wear to my pinning. I'd open it after graduation. I'd have time then. That was the plan. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. The burn under my breastbone had sharpened into something I couldn't wave off. I lay staring at the ceiling, running through diagnoses the way other people count sheep. Pain up top, dark stool, all those ibuprofen, the stress, the weight loss. I knew the answer. I just didn't want to hear it from anybody in a white coat. Around 2 a.m, I got up for the bathroom and nearly blacked out standing. I grabbed the towel bar, waited for the room to stop spinning, and sat on the edge of the tub until my vision cleared. My pulse was racing, way too fast. My body trying to force whatever blood was left through a system running low. I should go to the ER, I thought. I should call someone. But the ceremony was in 8 hours, and I'd bled 4 years of my life into that pin, and my grandfather was going to be sitting in that audience, and nobody else was coming. If I didn't cross that stage, the only person who bothered to show up would have nothing to show up for. So I drank a glass of water. I ate 3 saltines. I set my alarm for 6:30 and laid the pocket watch on the nightstand so the ticking could keep me company. I could feel the envelope in the blazer hanging on my bedroom door. A sealed question I wasn't ready to answer. 6 more hours. I just needed to stay upright for 6 more hours. I pressed a hand to my stomach, felt the heat and the hardness under it, and made a deal with my body. Get me through tomorrow, and I'll let you fall apart on Wednesday. My body had other ideas. The auditorium at Valley View seats around 450, and it was packed. Balloons, flowers, parents holding up their phones. I stood backstage in my white blazer, envelope in the pocket, watch ticking against my ribs, telling myself I was fine. Denise found me in the staging area. She looked at my face and said, "Ross, you're the color of printer paper." Nerves. Liar. Then she squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this, go get your pin." I walked out. The lights were blinding. The dean called names in order, and since Ross comes in the back half of the alphabet, I did have to wait a bit. When my turn came, I found him. 4th row, aisle seat. Grandpa Harold in a white dress shirt, the brass watch chain catching the light against his jacket. He lifted one hand and nodded. The seats around him were empty. No Mom, no Trevor, no Brooke, all three of them somewhere over the ocean, toasting with champagne they hadn't paid for. Cassidy Ross. I stepped forward for my pin. The dean smiled, I smiled back. And then the room tipped sideways like someone had grabbed the building and shaken it. The lights smeared together. A sound like rushing water filled my ears. I remember reaching for the podium. I remember missing it. I remember the microphone shrieking as I hit the floor and then 100 voices going off at once. Call 911, get a doctor, somebody call her family. I heard Grandpa's voice, close and cracked. I'm right here, sweetheart, I'm right here. Hands on my face. Denise barking orders, the taste of copper in the back of my throat. The last clear thought I had before everything went black was about the envelope in my jacket, pressed flat against the stage floor beneath me. Still sealed. Still waiting. If you've ever been the strong one that everybody leans on and nobody worries about, you already understand how I ended up on that floor. Stay with me, because what was in that envelope changed everything. This next part I put together later from Denise and from Grandpa, because I wasn't awake for any of it. The paramedics got there in 13 minutes. By then I'd lost enough blood that my pressure had dropped to 82/48. At Sonoran Ridge Medical Center, the ER team found a perforated gastric ulcer. The lining had worn all the way through and I was bleeding inside. They needed to operate right away. Surgery, 2 units of blood, maybe more. They needed consent. Protocol said contact the emergency contacts. The hospital tried my mother first since she was listed. Straight to voicemail. They tried again. Voicemail. A third time, voicemail. A nurse pulled Trevor's number from my phone. 2 rings, then voicemail. He'd already flipped his phone to airplane mode for boarding. Denise, who'd ridden in with the ambulance and was now arguing at the admitting desk about staying past visiting hours, called Grandpa. He was already in the waiting room. He'd chased the ambulance in his 15-year-old sedan, doing 45 on the freeway the whole way. I'm here, he told them. She's my granddaughter, I'm here. While I was being prepped, he called my mother from that waiting room. She actually picked up, one of the only times all day. His voice was steady when he told Denise about it afterward, but his hands were shaking. Cassidy collapsed. She has a perforated ulcer. She's going into surgery right now. And my mother, standing in the departure lounge with a boarding pass to Rome, said, Dad, we're about to board. Can you stay with her? We'll call when we land. They boarded, all 3 of them. First class, paid for with money that wasn't theirs, flying away from a daughter bleeding out on an operating table. I came to 2 days later to the sound of ticking. Brass against plastic. The pocket watch sat on my hospital tray, secondhand jumping along. Grandpa had taken it from my blazer and set it there so I'd hear it before I saw anything else. The room was white and too bright. An IV in my left hand, a monitor clipped to my finger, and the steady beeping of machines I'd spent 2 years learning to run, now running on me. Grandpa was asleep in the chair beside the bed, chin on his chest, still in the white dress shirt from the ceremony. 2 days. He'd been there 2 days. Denise appeared in the doorway with a coffee and eyes that looked like she'd been crying. Welcome back, Ross. Did I get my pin? She held it up, a little gold caduceus on a backing card. Pinned it to your gown while you were out, figured you earned it. I almost smiled. Then I reached for my phone. It was charged, screen down on the tray. I turned it over. 42 unread messages. A photo tag from the family group. I tapped it. There they were, my mother, my brother, and Brooke, standing in front of the Coliseum at golden hour, grinning, champagne in hand. Brooke's caption, family trip in Rome, finally, no stress, no drama. 200+ likes, comments full of hearts. It had been posted 9 hours after my surgery. 9 hours after my grandfather signed consent forms alone in a waiting room while I bled on a table. No stress, no drama. I set the phone back face down. I didn't cry. I didn't have the blood for it. Over the next 2 days, Grandpa came every morning and stayed until the nurses ran him out. He brought tamales. He brought the crossword. He sat in that plastic chair like a man on guard duty. And piece by piece, he told me the things he'd been carrying for months. Your mother took over my accounts after the pneumonia, he said one afternoon. peeling an orange with hands that trembled but never fumbled the knife. Told me it was temporary, just for emergencies. Then she started grabbing my mail, changed the PIN on my debit card, told the credit union I was confused. Did they believe her? She brought paperwork, the power of attorney. He stopped peeling. Went down to the branch on Alma School Road, sat across from the teller and said, "He doesn't even know what day it is. I need full access." There it was again. He doesn't even know what day it is. My mother's favorite line, her master key. Say it enough times and it becomes the family's reality. Grandpa's confused, Grandpa's slipping. Grandpa needs Marlene to run things. Never mind that the man could recite a starting lineup from a ball game 40 years back or tell you the exact wire gauge for a 20-amp circuit. She tried to take the watch too, he said quietly. I looked up. She what? Said she wanted it appraised for insurance. I told her no. It's the only thing left that's mine. His voice caught for a second. Then he squared his shoulders. Cassidy, I need you to open that envelope. The statement was still in my blazer in the belongings bag. I wasn't ready, but he needed me, and I was done being too tired to ask the hard questions. I asked Denise to bring my blazer. She handed it over without a word. I reached into the inside pocket and pulled out the envelope, creased now, faintly stained with something I chose not to think about. I opened it on the tray table. Grandpa watched from his chair, the watch ticking between us. 3 pages. Account summary, transaction history, running balance. I'm a nurse, not an accountant, but numbers are numbers. I read them twice. Then I picked up a pen from Denise's clipboard and started circling. February 12th, transfer $3,600 to an account ending in 5583. February 27th, transfer $2,500, same account. March 9th, transfer $4,400, same account. March 14th, charge $7,120, memo line Elite Journeys Travel/Rome FCO. March 20th, auto pay to Sunrise Pharmacy, returned insufficient funds. I put the pen down. Grandpa, whose account ends in 5583. No idea, I never approved any of those. I pulled up the family chat, still muted, still glowing in my notifications, and scrolled back to Brooke's trip planning. There it was. Marlene booked through Elite Journeys. First class, baby. $7,120 for flights, pulled from my grandfather's credit union while his pharmacy auto pay bounced and his beta blockers ran out. I sat there holding the statement, the watch ticking on the tray, the IV dripping into my arm, and I felt something shift. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Precision. The way it feels when a patient starts crashing and the training kicks in and your hands already know what to do before your brain catches up. This isn't a one-time thing, I said. This is a pattern. Grandpa nodded. What do we do? I looked at the circles on the page. 3 transfers, 1 Rome booking, 1 bounced prescription, dates, amounts, names. Document it, I said. That's the job. The next morning I asked Denise to sit with me during a quiet stretch between rounds. She pulled the curtain and listened without breaking in while I laid it all out. The transfers, the Rome charge, the bounced prescriptions. The power of attorney that was only ever supposed to be for emergencies. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Ross, you know what this is? I know what it looks like. It looks like financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. And you know what that makes you? A mandated reporter. One who happens to be the victim's granddaughter and who happens to have the proof sitting on her hospital tray. She wasn't smiling. This was Denise treating the truth like a scalpel. Precise, necessary, not always comfortable. Mandatory reporting, I said. Healthcare professionals with reasonable cause to believe a vulnerable adult is being exploited. And reporters acting in good faith are protected from liability. And a competent person can revoke a power of attorney anytime in writing. No court order needed as long as his mind is sound. She nodded. Is his mind sound? He knew my shift schedule before I did. He knew every one of those transfers was wrong. He's sharper than half the attendings on this floor. Then you know what to do. I did. I wasn't going to scream at my mother. I wasn't going to blow up at a holiday or fire off a furious group text. None of the things the old Cassidy might have done. The Cassidy who still thought being loud was the same as being heard. I was going to move quietly, correctly, by the book, exactly the way Denise had taught me. The day after that conversation, I was sitting up eating real food, almost feeling human. The watch was ticking on the tray. The circled statement was folded inside my pillowcase. I was reading over discharge paperwork when my phone went off. Not a single buzz, an avalanche, missed call, mom, missed call, mom, missed call, mom. I counted them as they loaded. 58 missed calls from my mother, all crammed into a 2-hour window that started at 3 in the morning Arizona time, which was noon in Rome. 23 texts from Mom, 15 from Trevor, 4 from Brooke. I read them in order. Cassidy, call me immediately. This is urgent, call now. We need you, answer right away. The credit union froze Dad's account. They're saying suspicious activity. You need to get to his house and have him call the bank. Get Grandpa to call the bank. You owe this family that much. Then Trevor, Cassidy, the hotel is threatening to charge Mom's personal card. Fix this. Then Brooke, this is so embarrassing. We can't even pay for dinner. 58 calls. Not one asked how I was. Not one mentioned the surgery, the hospital, the stage I'd hit 5 days earlier. They didn't need their daughter. They didn't need their sister. They needed their fixer. The reliable one, the nurse. The girl who always figured it out, to drive to Grandpa's house and sweet-talk him into reopening the money pipeline they'd been drinking from for 3 years. I set the phone face down on the tray. The watch ticked. The statement sat under my pillow. And for the first time in 32 years, I didn't call back. They sent me home a few days later with a sack of medications, a printed list of things I wasn't allowed to do, and firm instructions to rest for 3 weeks. I drove to Grandpa's house instead. The porch light was off. Behind the screen door, mail had stacked up almost a week deep, because the woman who was supposed to be running his life was in Rome burning through his money. I let myself in with my key. The place smelled like stale coffee and empty rooms. Harold was in his recliner with the news on low, and he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Cassidy. He pushed himself up out of the chair. He shouldn't have. His knees are shot, but he stood anyway. Aren't you supposed to be in bed? Probably, I said, setting my bag down, but there's something you need to see first. I told him about the 58 calls, the texts, the frozen account. The plain fact that not a single one of them had asked whether I was breathing. He listened with his jaw locked and his palms flat on his thighs, the way he sits when he's holding something down inside himself. Then I laid the circled statement in front of him. He studied it a long time. She's been taking it, he said, not borrowing, taking. Yes. How long? At least these 3 months, probably longer. We'd need older statements to be sure. He went quiet. Then he pointed at the dining table. A glossy pamphlet sat there for a place called Copper Creek Memory Care. She left that before the trip, said it was just in case, told your brother to bring it up at a family meeting once they were back. I picked it up. Photos of smiling old people in beige hallways. She wants to put you in a facility. She wants to put me somewhere I can't ask questions. He looked at me, and his eyes were the sharpest I'd seen them in months. Cassidy, tell me how to do this the right way. The right way started with a phone call. I sat at his kitchen table with the statement, a legal pad, and my laptop, and I did exactly what Denise had drilled into me. Document. Report. Protect. First call went to Arizona Adult Protective Services. I introduced myself as a nursing graduate and a mandated reporter. My license wasn't official yet, but under state law the duty to report covers any healthcare worker with reasonable cause, and I had 3 pages of reasonable cause marked in blue ink. The intake worker was a woman named Angela Whitmore. Steady voice, careful questions. She logged a case number and told me an investigator would reach out within 72 hours. Second call went to an elder law attorney named Rebecca Nolan, whose name I pulled off the state bar referral line. I walked her through it. A power of attorney agent moving money out of a competent person's accounts. A bounced pharmacy autopay. Suspected exploitation. She asked me exactly one thing. Is your grandfather mentally competent? He named the date of every unauthorized transfer before I even showed him the statement. Then he can revoke the power of attorney himself. No court needed. He signs a written revocation and notifies the credit union. Third call went to the fraud department at Copper State Credit Union. I didn't say I was his granddaughter. I said I was a healthcare professional reporting suspected financial exploitation of one of their members. They bumped me up to a supervisor. I gave them the APS case number. They said they'd flag the account for a forensic review, that pending transfers might get reversed, but that older withdrawals, in their words, may not be recoverable. May not. Denise's voice in my head. Hedge. Don't promise what you can't deliver. I wrote it all down. Dates, times, names, case numbers. The job doesn't clock out when the shift ends. 2 days later, Rebecca Nolan came to the house with a folder of paperwork. She sat across from Grandpa at the same dining table where the memory care pamphlet was still lying, and she walked him through every page. Revocation of the old power of attorney. A new durable power of attorney naming me, Cassidy Ross, as his agent. A healthcare proxy, also naming me. A written notice to Copper State to strip Marlene Ross off the account and refuse any further transactions from her. He read each page. He asked questions, good ones, precise ones, the kind that made Rebecca raise an eyebrow and tell him he was sharper than most clients half his age. 40 years as an electrician, he said. I know when somebody's crossed the wrong wire. He signed everything. The signature came slow, arthritis pulling at his hand, but it never wavered. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at me. How long do you figure she's been at this? The statement only shows 3 months, but the pharmacy said the auto pay's been bouncing since January. Rebecca thinks we should pull 12 months of records to see the whole thing. And the Rome trip, the 7,000 in flights. He picked up the brass pocket watch off the table and turned it in his hand. She tried to take this too, said she wanted it appraised. I reached over and covered his hand with mine. She can't touch it, she can't touch any of it now. He nodded, slow and certain. My money, my name, my call, I'm still here. The revocation was filed that afternoon. The credit union had it by close of business. Marlene didn't know yet. She was still in Rome, still posting pictures, still convinced she was holding all the keys. Trevor called me that evening. I'd been waiting for it. The family charm campaign always opens with him, the golden boy, the one who never had to earn a warm welcome. Hey Cass, smooth, rehearsed. How are you feeling? We were so worried. Were you? Of course we were. Look, we cut the trip short, flying back tomorrow. Mom's a mess. Is she? Cassidy, I know things got complicated, but whatever's happening with Grandpa's accounts, that's a family matter. We can sort it out ourselves quietly. Sort out what exactly? A pause. What do you mean? What is it we're sorting out? The 3,600 in February, the 4,400 in March. The $7,000 flight booking. Longer pause. Those were expenses. Mom manages his. Mom's power of attorney was revoked. Dead air, a full 5 seconds of it. What? Grandpa revoked it. The new one names me. The credit union already knows. You Cassidy, you can't just. I didn't, he did. He's competent, it's his legal right. The charm drained out of his voice and something harder slid in behind it. You're manipulating a confused old man because you're mad about a vacation. He's not confused. He listed every unauthorized transfer before I showed him a thing. This is insane. You can't blow up the whole family over an accounting issue. An accounting issue, I let that hang. Trevor, his pharmacy card bounced. His heart medication went unpaid for months while Mom booked first class with his money. We'll pay it all back after the next closing. He stopped, heard himself, but it was already out. After the next closing. A confession wearing the costume of a promise. He'd known, they'd all known. I'll see you at the family meeting, I said and hung up. Brooke moved faster than her husband. Within half a day of his call, she'd posted one of those Instagram stories, the vague kind that names no one but makes sure everybody knows who she means. Black screen, white letters. Some people use a sick old man to get attention. Protect your family's peace. Under it, a shot of herself at the airport looking teary, captioned, coming home early because the drama never stops. Say a prayer for us. She had somewhere north of 13,000 followers, mostly other women who liked her linen outfits and her grateful little morning reels. Her whole brand, if you want to call it that, was Blessed Family. Every brunch photo, every vacation clip, every "my husband is my best friend" caption fed a carefully built picture that now had a crack running down the middle of it. I watched the stories from my couch and felt nothing. Not because I'm cold, because I was busy. I had a surgical follow-up. I had licensing exam prep to start. And I had a grandfather whose 12-month record had just landed at Rebecca Nolan's office, and the numbers were worse than I'd braced for. The pattern went back 11 months. More than $33,000 moved into accounts my mother controlled. The Rome trip was the single biggest hit, but it was far from the only one. There were smaller ones too. 500 here, 800 there. Like somebody testing how much they could lift before an alarm went off. What got to me wasn't the total. It was the timing. The transfers started 2 months after Grandpa signed the power of attorney. She'd waited just long enough for the paper to feel routine, long enough for everyone to forget it existed. By the time I finished reading, 3 of Brooke's sponsors had quietly dropped her. I noticed because I wasn't the only one who'd started watching for patterns. My mother called the night before the meeting. I picked up because I wanted to hear what she'd say once the script ran dry. "Cassidy." Her voice was thick and raw, like she'd been crying. "We need to talk before tomorrow. I'm listening. I know you think I'm a monster, but you have no idea what it's been like." She stopped, and for a second I heard something I hadn't heard from her in 9 years of widowhood. Real exhaustion. "When your father died, the life insurance barely covered the funeral. I had 2 kids, a mortgage, a credit score already underwater. I started borrowing from Dad's account, small amounts, just to cover Trevor's deposit, the car payment, and then it wasn't small. No," her voice cracked. "It got easier every time. I told myself I'd pay it back. I told myself he had more than he needed. I told myself he'd never even notice. His medication bounced, Mom. I know, for months. I know." There was a silence, and for one heartbeat I thought maybe there was something underneath all the excuses. Something honest I could actually reach. Then she said, "But you have to understand, Cassidy, I gave that man my whole life. I moved back here after your father died. I drove him to every appointment. I gave up my career for him. He owes me." And there it went. The moment closed. The crack sealed itself back up with entitlement and self-pity, and the woman on the phone was my mother again. The one who'd rewritten reality so many times she believed her own edits. "He doesn't owe you his savings," I said. "He doesn't owe anyone. You think a few bank statements make you the good one. I think a few bank statements make me the honest one." She hung up. I set the phone down and looked at the pocket watch on my nightstand, still ticking. She didn't know yet. The new power of attorney, the APS report, the fraud review. She was walking into tomorrow blind. For the first time in my life, I knew more than my mother did. She set the family meeting for that Saturday at her house. She'd pitched it to the wider family as a talk about Dad's care, which was technically true, just not the way she meant it. She invited Aunt Sharon, her older sister and co-successor trustee of Grandpa's small estate, Uncle Dale, Sharon's husband, 2 cousins, and Gus, Grandpa's neighbor across the street, who'd been checking on him while the rest of them were in Rome, and who Marlene had invited as a character witness, expecting him to confirm that Harold seemed confused. She'd packed the room, or thought she had. 10 copies of the Copper Creek pamphlet were fanned across the coffee table like a real estate open house. I knew the playbook cold. Present Harold as failing. Cast herself as the devoted daughter. Cast me as the resentful younger child who'd manipulated a confused old man during a health crisis. It was a decent plan. Might have even worked if Harold were actually confused. I called him that morning. "You sure you want to come? I can handle this." "Cassidy, I've sat in my house for 2 years while my daughter told everyone I was losing my mind. I'm coming. The lawyer says you don't have to say a word. Just being there and clear-headed is enough. I'm not going to sit there like a prop." I heard the click of the watch lid opening. I know what day it is, I know what time it is, and I know who took my money. I put on the only blazer that still fit after I'd dropped 18 pounds in the hospital, the same one from my pinning, the one with the envelope pocket. Grandpa wore his white dress shirt and his Union jacket. We looked like 2 people headed to a funeral. In a way, we were. Her living room, 2 in the afternoon. 12 people crammed into a space built for 6. Aunt Sharon on the love seat. Uncle Dale beside her, arms folded. 2 cousins I hadn't seen since Thanksgiving. Gus from across the street looking miserable in a folding chair. Trevor on the couch with Brooke, who was dressed like she was headed to a press conference. And my mother up front by a little folding table, pamphlets arranged, reading glasses on, radiating the calm of a woman certain she'd already won. Grandpa and I came in last. He walked slow, the knees, but he walked straight. I stayed half a step behind and said nothing. "Thank you all for coming," Mom began. "I called this because I'm worried about Dad." She lifted a pamphlet. "As most of you know, he's been declining, confusion, forgetfulness. He can't manage his own affairs anymore. I've done my best, but we've reached the point where we need to discuss next steps." She cut a glance at me. "Unfortunately, Cassidy has been inserting herself into Dad's financial decisions during a very vulnerable time while I was away caring for the family." "You were in Rome," I said quietly. She blinked. "I'm afraid she may have pushed Dad into some choices that aren't in his best interest." Aunt Sharon looked at me. Gus leaned forward. Trevor stared at his shoes. Mom turned to Grandpa, who sat in the armchair by the window, hands on the armrests, jacket buttoned. "Dad," she said gently, in the voice you'd use with a confused child, "can you tell everyone what day it is?" She smiled. The room waited. Grandpa reached into his pocket. The brass watch caught the light as he drew it out. Scratched, heavy, 40 years engraved on the back. Every person in that room watched him press the release. The lid popped with a soft click that landed in the silence like a starter's pistol. He looked at the face of the watch. Then he looked at his daughter and said, in a voice as clear as tap water, "It's Saturday, June 28th, 18 minutes past 2, Mountain Standard Time." He snapped the watch shut. "The woman to my left is my granddaughter, Cassidy. The woman standing in front of me is my daughter, Marlene. And over the past 11 months, Marlene has moved $33,000 out of my credit union account without my knowledge or my say-so, including a $7,000 charge to Elite Journeys travel for first-class flights to Rome." Nobody breathed. I reached into my folder and laid the documents on the coffee table, right on top of the memory care pamphlets. 3 months of statements with every unauthorized transfer ringed in blue. The 12-month summary from Rebecca Nolan. The APS case number. And the written revocation of power of attorney signed by Harold Keller, notarized, filed. "Mom's power of attorney was revoked 10 days ago," I said. My voice was flat and level. "The way you talk during a code, calm because the situation demands it." Grandpa signed a new one naming me as his agent. "The credit union knows. An APS report is filed. Their fraud team is reviewing the account." I looked at my mother. "He knows exactly what day it is." "So do I," Marlene stared at me, then at the papers, then at Harold. And then she broke, but not the way you'd want. No apology, no remorse. Her face twisted and she started sobbing, big theatrical heaves that she aimed at Aunt Sharon like a weapon. "After everything I did for him," she gasped. "After everything I gave up. Moving back here, throwing away my life, driving him to every appointment. You charged his account for a Rome vacation," Aunt Sharon said. She'd picked up the statement. "While your daughter was in surgery. You don't understand, I was going to pay it back." $33,000, Uncle Dale said, cold as a well. Trevor opened his mouth, then shut it. Brooke was staring at her phone, knuckles white. And Gus, the neighbor Marlene had brought in to prove Harold was slipping, shook his head slowly and said, "Walter plays chess with me every Tuesday. I've never once beaten him." "You wanted no stress and no drama," I said to my mother. "This is what no drama cost him." She grabbed her purse. She jabbed a finger at me. "You'll regret this, after everything I did." And she walked out. The front door slammed. The room sat quiet. Grandpa let out a breath like it was the first one he'd taken in 2 years. Aunt Sharon set the statement down and looked at him. "Walter, why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," he said. "She told you I was confused. You believed her." Sharon's face went tight. She turned to me. "Do you need from us?" "Just what you've already seen. The caseworker may want to talk with family to confirm the timeline. If Aunt Sharon's willing, her role as co-trustee could matter. I'm willing, Sharon said at once. Trevor stood. I need some air. He went to the kitchen and didn't come back. Brooke followed, thumbs flying over her phone, deleting stories, I figured. Gus came over and shook Grandpa's hand. Tuesday at 4, I'll bring the board. Grandpa managed a smile. You'll still lose. After everyone filed out, it was just the two of us in my mother's living room, surrounded by unused memory care pamphlets and the faint smell of her perfume. Grandpa lifted the pocket watch off the table, turned it over and held it out. I meant it. I want you to have this. Grandpa, you're the only one who looked me in the eye. I took the watch. It was warm. Here's how it landed. The APS investigation substantiated the complaint inside 3 weeks. Angela Whitmore's team laid out the whole pattern. 11 months of unauthorized transfers, a bounced pharmacy autopay, a travel charge that matched the family's Rome itinerary down to the day. The credit union's fraud unit reversed 3 pending transfers, $4,900 in all. The older withdrawals, $28,000 and change, fell into what Rebecca Nolan called a civil recovery zone, meaning Grandpa could chase them in court, but there were no guarantees. We might get some back, she told us. But in most of these cases, the money's already spent before anyone files. That's the honest answer. We didn't sue. Grandpa didn't want to. I don't need a judge to tell me my daughter stole from me, he said. I just need it to stop. It stopped. Marlene was formally removed as his power of attorney agent and as executor of his estate. Aunt Sharon stepped in as co-agent alongside me. The credit union issued a new debit card, reset the auto-pay for his prescriptions, and put a fraud alert on the account. His heart medication was filled within 2 days. Trevor, cut off from the family safety net he'd been leaning on, refinanced his commercial real estate debt and paused his BMW lease. He didn't call me for 2 months. When he finally did, it was one sentence. I should have known. I didn't argue with him. Brooke lost 4 sponsors in the week after the meeting. Somebody in the extended family talked, and her blessed family brand didn't survive the collision with reality. She scrubbed her Rome photos. I only found out because someone told me, since I'd left the family group chat the night after the meeting. I typed nothing. I just hit exit and watched the little sun emoji vanish from my notifications. The quietest exit I've ever made, and the most satisfying. I passed my licensing exam on the first try and started my first shift as a registered nurse at Sonoran Ridge, the same hospital where they'd operated on me 6 weeks later. Denise was my charge nurse. She handed me my badge and said, "Don't ever let me catch you skipping meals again." Wouldn't dream of it. Liar. Grandpa quietly paid off my nursing school tuition. $21,000 wired to my loan servicer without a word of fanfare. When I protested, he said, "Your grandmother Ruth would have done it herself if she were still here. Call it back pay for 2 years of Sunday house calls." I didn't argue. It wasn't a fortune. It was room to breathe, the steady kind, the first I'd had in years. My mother hasn't spoken to me since the meeting. Through Aunt Sharon, I hear she's in therapy. I hope that's true. I don't call to check.